Hello, welcome to tonight's Your Call live on fectv.com. Tonight we're going to be talking about Cork, the floods, and should we be pointing the finger of blame at the insurance industry? I'm joined tonight by Noel over here, and I'm joined by a very special guest, Brendan Dempsey, who is the Vice President of the Society of St Vincent de Paul in the Cork region. Real honour having you on the show tonight, Brendan. Really appreciate it. I'm going to launch straight in with a bit of a first question here. Brendan, why should we have it in for the insurance industry?
Well, the insurance industry isn't very fair to the public. Insurance does not cover the cost of the damage done fully. It doesn't put houses back the way they were prior to the flooding.
Yeah, we're talking about the flooding in 2009 and 2012 to a lesser degree here.
Correct, yeah. It does not repair the house to the way it was prior to the flooding. And since the flooding, the insurance industry has tripled the premiums, and it has effectively got rid of about 95% of the risk, while at the same time tripling policies.
Now, this is something that was brought, I believe, to the Cork Council by councillors, bringing the proof of this price hikes by the insurance company. Did anything come from that?
Not that I know of.
Interesting.
Why did they triple it, do you think?
Because they're able to. Simply because they can. There are no laws governing the insurance industry like
but what's
the
their
bankers.
Thinking behind it?
Will make more money.
Okay, fair enough.
They're there to make money. That's what insurance companies do. Okay?
I suppose you could say, though, does the insurance industry itself, I suppose, not have a right to make a profit?
Of course it does. It's there to make a profit, but it's there to take risks. It's there to cover risks. That's what insurance does.
And you're saying at the moment, with these places where it is blanketing, I suppose, that they're not taking the risk or the necessary risk to insure people's homes?
They've gotten rid of, they will not cover flood or subsidence in areas that is prone to flooding. They will not cover it, and they have approximately tripled the costs of premiums.
Is this where the society plan come in, the national fund that I believe that you were proposing or putting forward?
Yeah, we are and have been for the last 9 months trying to put a trust together. A trust. It's not an insurance policy, it's a trust. And we have asked senior people from the insurance industry to sit on this trust, plus people of standing from the community to run it. We don't want anything to do with it other than to set it up. It's to help people where insurance will not be given for flooding, or where insurance doesn't meet the cost of repairing houses from flooding.
And would people who
By the way, sorry, we actually haven't put it together yet, and a very good journalist heard about it and broke the story on the Irish Examiner.
That's right.
We weren't quite ready for it.
So it's coming.
It's coming down the line, hopefully.
And we'll say anyone who'd sign up to it, do they have to, like an insurance company, do they have to pay a premium?
Well,
or
somebody has to put money up front. Somebody has to fund this. We've looked at the way they do it in America, and I think there's another case in New Zealand where they have something similar. Somebody has to put money up. We would be asking the government for quite a large sum, maybe $1 million or so. Insurance industry put money into it. As happens in other countries, the insurance industry donate, let's say, €1 from each policy they sell. The householder would have to join if they so wished to get some kind of cover, perhaps €2 a week.
And this would be for people who have no cover whatsoever at the moment.
For flooding.
Which I believe is, I think, around 2% last year of the total of Ireland who don't have cover for this. In terms of the lack of insurance, which is what we're talking about here, you've told us that insurance companies have blanket across the board, and I believe
whole areas,
which is called geocoding, that they put them on an area code of latitude and longitude and say, right, this particular area blanked, we're not going to do it. In terms of that, the lack of insurance, how does it actually impact the people? I'd like to know sort of a little bit more about how it really impacts people.
Well, if you can't get insurance, you can't get cover for your house. You know, you can't protect yourself. The biggest problem that we have, that people are having, especially from 2009, is that they cannot sell their property. In 2009, a wedge of Cork City got flooded. Approximately a fifth of the city was destroyed by floods. You cannot sell a house within that area today, because if somebody wishes to buy, they have to get a mortgage, and you can't get a mortgage if you can't get insurance. So the insurance industry have brought the entire industry to a halt, selling and buying of houses.
And that brings in straight into the mortgage crisis itself, because if you can't pay for your premiums on your insurance, you can't get that, you can't remortgage your house, for instance, to raise more funds, you then can't keep up with the payments on your mortgage. And one way of trying to get out of that would be to go to lenders. And that was another thing that you have a problem with, I suppose.
We have a problem because people are going to money lenders. And the state here, in their generosity, allow money lenders charge up to 187% interest. That's 187%. If your credit card is up around, what is it, 26, 27%, you're cribbing. People crib. You know, the middle class and the rich crib over the cost of a credit card. The poor have to pay 187%. And it's actually crushing families, because people who are flooded have no access to normal credit facilities.
It is unfortunate that people have found themselves in a situation where they can't sell their house, you know, because they can't have the insurance as a result of the flooding. But, you know, are they to blame a little in the sense that they bought a house in an area that was open to flooding? I mean...
Well, you take last year, when Cork City flooded in 3 separate areas, you take Glanmire, 42 houses flooded down there. Each house down there is, well, I spoke to at least 40 of them. They're short, they've a shortfall in the insurance of anything from 1,000 to 17,000 euros to put their house back in order again. Were they to blame? They were ordinary working people, men and women, got married, went out and bought a 3-bedroom semi-detached on a new housing estate. The housing estate had got planning. The local authorities had visited the site, done all their research and granted permission. How can we blame an office worker if the county engineer says that's perfect, go ahead and build there? Who's to blame?
So the various local authorities around the country then, they have a lot to answer for as well, because they let this, you know, these various housing estates, wherever they may be, they let them be built.
Well, two of the other areas in Cork that got flooded last year, one out in Douglas, where a river went under through a tunnel under a road, and the council in its wisdom put a grate, a very fine grate on the tunnel, and of course debris coming down the river blocked the grate and it flooded. That's bad planning. You can't blame the little old lady living in the house around the corner for that. The other area that flooded up in Ballyvalan must be 500-600 feet above sea level, above water level, above the River Lee. But it was built on a field that's shaped like a saucer. And to get rid of the water, the planners put one drain, just one drain at the lowest point. And then the council started saving money, so they got rid of the guy with the pick and shovel, and nobody cleaned the shores. The shore blocked, and the houses had 4-5 feet of water in them. Who's to blame? So
this is essentially a hangover from the boom, where, you know, corners were potentially cut, tailed away maintenance, and now essentially Cork paid for it over 2 major occasions in 2009, 2012.
I'm not a legal eagle, but it certainly sounds like there would be some sort of case that could be taken there against local authorities, maybe. Well, but I guess we'll have to wait and see if anyone will come forward to fight that battle. That battle is being fought. I understand there's a case going through the courts at the moment. A very large organisation in Cork, UCC, the local university, I am told is suing
as taking a case to court.
And I suppose that would, hopefully, I suppose on your side of things, would open the floodgate for, let's say, the smaller householders to put some form of claim across.
Well, that was an unfortunate remark. Now, open the floodgates.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
That was the cause of the flooding in 2009. I understand when the ESB
could
released
you elaborate
water.
on that a little for us?
Well, in 2009, the ESB found it necessary to release water from the hydroelectric dam up the River Lee, and the result was 3 to 4 feet of water in 1/5 of Cork City.
And a sort of
unfortunately,
amount.
the tide was in at the time when the water was released as well, you know.
So it was a catastrophe, you know,
Yes.
one on top of another.
One on top of another, yeah.
I suppose coming back to that, in terms of looking at where blame can be apportioned, if we start thinking about, well, the insurance companies are essentially sort of doing their job as such, about making the profit. If we look back on why these floods happened in the first place, like you've just mentioned, should the blame then be apportioned more on the side of government, local government especially? I mean, for something like the River Lee project, which was to the flood defence project, which was initiated in 2006, and yet this last year they've now said no work will be put into it until potentially 2014-15. It's a pushback and a pushback and a pushback, yet these things have happened.
It is.
Is that somewhere where blame should be apportioned?
Well, of course, blame has to be apportioned here. And the councils, the state itself, through the councils, is responsible for a lot of the problems.
Are, I suppose, the local authorities, and more so the government, doing anything about this? Because, I mean, when the floods happened here in Cork in particular, we had one government in control, and now we have, you know, the opposition at the time in control. Are they doing anything, or are they ignoring the problem?
When the floods hit Cork in 2009, I was around the streets of Cork for the following week or fortnight, and certainly a lot of councillors were running around screaming for an inquiry. Since then, the same councillors have gotten into power. There's been a near silence in Dáil Éireann since they got into power. You know, they're doing nothing as far as I'm concerned. They're doing nothing.
And why do you think that is?
I think everybody is waiting to see who was responsible for the 2009 flooding, and a court case will probably decide that.
I suppose in that case, in terms of doing nothing, it's completely against the best interests of both the local authority and the government not to start putting some plan in effect, because, as we said, to go back to the insurance companies, they won't insure these areas, these houses, for flooding now, unless something is obviously done by the government to absolutely, let's say absolutely guarantee them that there will not be flooding on that scale. That would be, I would assume, well within the sort of the remit of the government to want to do something like that, you know, to actually get the ball rolling on that.
Well, you'd imagine, so I mean, we're kind of lucky at the moment there's a recession on and people can't afford housing. What happens when the recession is over and young couples want to buy homes? They won't be able to get insurance and they won't be able to get the mortgages.
Do you think that's why some of the mortgages now that are in arrears, for instance, in this country, if they are in flood-affected areas, do you think that's why the banks are sort of letting that arrears go on a little bit further? Because they know that if they repossess that house, the bank's going to be stuck with it, that they won't be able to sell it.
You'd imagine, well, there are two things about that. You'd imagine that the banks would show more interest in properties that they own, that have been made valueless by the decisions made by insurance companies. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this field, lads. I'm a lorry driver. You know, that's what I do for
Very
a living.
articulate lorry driver, I must say.
I'm not an expert in this field at all, but I know that nothing really is being done to help the people whose lives have been crushed by this disaster. The state, at the beginning of last year, when the floods hit, the state said that they were making 10 million euros available through the Red Cross to help people. When people started coming to us, and it has cost us several 100,000 euros helping families, when people started coming to us, we rang the Red Cross and said, listen, where's the 10 million? They said, we never got it, we got no money. So there's 10 million euros sitting in a drawer somewhere in Dublin, and I'd like someone to find the key and release it. We could use it.
We,
by the way, you know, we're still repairing houses for people that were caught in the 2009 flooding.
What do you think it's going to take then, Brendan, I suppose? What do you think it's going to take to change this policy, to get some action started? What do you think it's going to take from people?
Well, I think people have to start protesting. They don't. We're a very, very quiet country. If this happened in Greece, can you imagine what would happen?
I can.
Yeah, we're a very quiet country. It's going to take, I don't know.
But do you think the protests will do anything? Because, I mean, ultimately our
protests
country...
always work.
Yeah, but our budget is kind of controlled, we'll say, ultimately by the Troika.
Yeah.
Is it a case of the government to just turn around and go, look, we've no money to deal with this problem right now. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but we're, you know...
Well, then let them say so. At least tell people, be honest with people and say, guys, listen, we're broke, we can't afford it. At least if you're honest with people. We're promising 10 million and it's not coming, and making all kinds of promises to do things that don't happen. I mean, it took 2 years, if I remember rightly, it took 2 years to build the wall outside the Mercy Hospital that got knocked in the floods. The river overflowed and it knocked the wall. It took about 2 years to get that wall fixed. Simple wall. Get it rebuilt.
Before we finish, Brendan, I suppose if you had one thing to say to the people out there watching, and to the people, I suppose, let's say the councillors and the like, who have the power to do something about that, if you had one thing to sort of say to them to sum up your position and the position of the Society of St Vincent de Paul, what would it be?
I would speak on, if I may at all, if I have any right to speak on anybody's behalf, speak on those who have no voice, the poor, those who are stuck in this awful situation. I would ask them to put pressure, to bring in rules that would
force the insurance
like companies. The insurance industry have no rules governing the rules that govern the insurance industry. They make them themselves. The state has no rules governing the insurance industry.
So it's about time there is some regulation.
Well,
there.
if you remember, that's where the banks were a few years ago.
Yeah. And now you've got another huge industry, huge profits running away with things.
Yes.
With no regulation.
You think about it, the insurance industry has huge control over all aspects of our lives. Everything has to have insurance. They must be one of the biggest industries in this country in turnover. And there's no rules governing them. They're able to make their own rules.
Yeah. It's about time something was done.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It is. Well, look, Brendan, thank you so much for joining us tonight on a really interesting discussion about Cork and the Cork area. I suppose to those families out there who are still in crisis,
contact us.
Contact the Society of St Vincent de Paul. Thanks for watching Your Call. Again, we'll be back on tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Check us out there on fecttv.com.